Welcome to Marketing Masters, Andrew, where we explore the art and science of modern marketing and try and get all of your amazing tips and tricks and insights that you've built up over the years and years that you've honed your craft and help listeners become better marketers and fast-track their success by learning the lessons that you've, learnt yourself and sharing them with the audience. I feel like the value that people get when they can, it's like when you read a book, somebody's taken 10 years to write a book and then, they synthesize it down. And if you take the time to read the book, you can learn so much. Same with podcasts, talking to people, I find I try and create this where people can get as much as they can out of it in that short 1 hour time.
Yeah.
So I really am thankful that you're here. We'll do a little bit of an intro. Your journey to where you are now is pretty impressive. You've just recently come back from Google campus. You started out as an intern reporter and became an online editor, and then you made the leap into digital marketing, where you've spent more than a decade honing your craft. Today, you're the global head of SEM at Xero, one of New Zealand's biggest success stories, and you've just completed the 2024 Google Honours Program.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Thanks, Zania.
So tell us, give me a bit of an intro into how you've become so passionate about digital marketing in the first place. Like, why are you in it day to day? Do you love it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always changing and evolving and always innovative. Firstly, I just need to say thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I really enjoy your podcast and I love podcasts. So there's just such a great format to be able to, learn and glean things about the industry. I think for young people coming in, especially. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
But yeah, how did I get into digital marketing? So, interesting. As you mentioned, I didn't study advertising or marketing at university. I studied journalism. I remember the first day I went into journalism school, the lecturer got up in front of the class and he said, if you're looking for a stable career that's going to make you money over the long term, you've come to the wrong place. And I said, okay, well, this is a bit of a problem. I'm going to need to figure something out. And I was always really interested in technology. So I was writing articles and I wrote about the traditional media business model and sort of what was going on there. And it turned out that a lot of the sort of spend was moving away from like New Zealand Herald classifieds and the yellow pages and things like that and going online and specifically into Google Ads because, advertisers were seeing more ROI from that. And that insight really captured me. It's like, okay, what's going on there? And I just sort of kept pulling on that thread and, eventually ended up in the digital advertising sort of industry and sort of here we are today, I guess.
You got hooked.
And I got hooked, I think that when I got hooked, it was quite early on in my career. And a guy actually came to me and he was part of a franchise. And he said, I'm spending a lot of money on this, being part of this franchise. It's like a percentage of my revenue each year. And can you help me because I want to go out on my own? And I was like, yeah, sure. We'll figure it out. So I did a bit of research into his vertical and wrote some copy, did the UX wireframing for his website. And he said, the thing is, I've got a couple of kids and, I've got a mortgage, so I need to start getting leads like really quickly. So there's like a bit of urgency there. So I worked with the developer. We got his website live and we turned on Google Ads and believe it or not, we started with a budget of $10 a day. Okay. And we just wanted to see, see what was out there in terms of opportunity. And it turned out, that first week that his website went live, we started generating leads, which was really great. So tick that box. But, what I was finding was that there was like 2 or 3 keywords that were actually driving all of those conversions for him. So I optimized his website for those keywords. And, all of a sudden we started getting those organically, right? And I'll never forget the day he called me up on the phone and he was like, mate, look, we need to turn off that massive amount of spend that we've got going on Google AdWords at the moment because you're just driving too many leads for me. And I was like, this is great. Like, this is a perfect outcome.
Was that still at $10?
It was $10 a day. So we turned off the $10 a day. I was like, go buy yourself a beer, And yeah, that's what I think really like the light bulb went off and the dopamine started firing because I was actually really changing things for this guy. And that's what really got me hooked, I think.
That's what's got me hooked too.
Yeah.
You can help see where someone's struggling or it's not quite working, and then you can go in and kind of shift things around, do it a little bit differently, and then the rewards come.
Yeah.
And when they see the rewards come,
Yeah.
I think you get the most out of watching them kind of be so grateful and thankful, and like, yeah, it's cool. I think that's probably why I love it too.
Yeah.
So to get everybody on the same page, I mean, you've kind of given an intro into what performance marketing is, but what is your definition of performance marketing, and why is it so critical in today's landscape?
Yeah, sure.
Today's episode of Marketing Masters is brought to you by Craving, an Auckland-based food and beverage content agency who specialises in recipe creation, food styling and production of the most delicious, epic-looking content in the market. Go to Craving, craving.co.nz to find out more.
Okay, so performance is essentially like measurable, results-driven digital marketing, So you spend $1 and you know exactly what that dollar did for you, whether it drove a conversion, a sale, a lead, hopefully some sort of measurable or meaningful business outcome. A good way to describe it is like, it's like marketing with receipts, okay? So, but it's not just paid media, it's a whole ecosystem of different types of disciplines and specialisms. And, it's all sort of based around this idea that, you test, you learn, you iterate, and you just keep going through that cycle. And like data-driven decision-making is absolutely key and fundamental to that thinking. And the idea is that whatever tweaks you're making and modifications or optimizations, they can have a meaningful impact to your ROI, right? So you're constantly making things better. So sort of you could think about like MacGyver kind of thing, sometimes, especially when you're working with small and medium-sized businesses, like the example I just gave you.
Yeah.
You're trying to rub two sticks together to make something happen.
Yeah.
And often there's a bit of time pressure associated with that too. So it's, it's constantly just like trying to find new solutions and innovative ways to problem solve, right? And yeah, it's evolved over the years. It used to be like SEO, paid search, affiliate marketing, and now it's grown to include like social influencer partnerships, GEO or like AEO, which is like a new emerging sort of like SEO space for AI. And now with like AI sort of coming in and overlaying across like business and just life in general, it adds like more complexity and opportunity and probably a lot of disruption to the space. And so like you kind of have to adapt or you're going to get left behind. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that's performance marketing, I think. Yeah.
And so should every business have performance marketing in their toolkit to succeed? Or is it that certain businesses, but I feel like given that example you've just given, could that scenario still happen today? Could you start on Google with just $10 a day and see how it goes?
I think there's somewhere you could be like trialing $10 a day and seeing what happens, like probably with Perplexity at the moment, like really early nascent opportunities is probably where you can start with such small amounts. Like Google AdWords now, the cost per clicks have like grown way out of proportion, like to the point where there's like a floor price and then there's just competition and like, the competition knows exactly where to go, and that just keeps that cost per click at like a certain level.
Because it's an auction method, and so it just keeps pushing it up.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. But no, I'd argue that most businesses can benefit from running some sort of performance marketing. I think like traditional thinking would suggest that, like, say, let's think like luxury brands, for example. Like you want to take care of that brand perception, focus on the craftsmanship, focus on the premium element of it, and let the retail partner do the performance marketing side of things. But I'd sort of like, and I agree to a certain extent, like you don't want to see a $7,000 Louis Vuitton bag with like, end of line sale, 15% off, countdown timer flashing in red on your screen, right? No. Like that's going to drag everything down. It's just not the right way to be doing things.
For the brand, yeah.
But like you could still run some sort of element of performance marketing around like everyone needs to generate first party data. Okay. And so there is like a tasteful way to be running your activity.
Just so that everyone is still on the same page, give an explanation about first-party data, because I know you're like,
sure.
up here, but not everyone who's listening knows.
Yeah, what is first-party data? It's basically like, running campaigns to incentivize, your audience signing up and providing them their details so that you can get a better understanding as to who they are, right? So it might be as simple as an email address or a mobile number or something along those lines. And the idea is that over time, you're generating up this audience so that you can get a better single view of your customer and who they actually are. You might have an idea in your mind of who you think they are. 9 times out of 10, that's going to be somewhat off. And so if one day you do want to run more performance marketing, you don't have to rely on things like cookies, which are being deprecated, and you're in a much stronger position to be able to talk to your audience on a one-to-one or like a one-to-many sort of basis. Yeah.
I'm going to go off piste a little bit because I've got some questions in my head, which I would really love to get your input on.
Yeah.
So I've been talking to a few brands recently, and I'm really surprised to hear how often they're, for instance, tapping their email database. So one example is a retail brand that's doing emails 3 times a week. And I was like, really? Is that working for you?
Yeah, right.
And how are your unsubscribe rates? And and then another one recently, again, 3 times a week. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting for Auckland-based businesses.
Yeah.
I'd just like to kind of get your feel on that. Is what your view is on.
Yeah, but I mean, like there's no singular number that's like correct. So like different businesses, different verticals, they're going to have different relationships with their customers. Sometimes it's like on a needs basis, like you need to be reaching out to your audience on a super regular basis because of X, Y, and Z. In other situations, like it's not welcome. It might be the case that, like, for example, if you're a council-run organization, you might be sending too many emails and people aren't leaning in and it's just sort of like noise. So you need to strike like a good balance there and really look at the data to inform what you're doing.
And it has to be the data, right? It's the open rates, the unsubscribes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really understanding your audience. Like, again, like if you're the council, there is a right way to do things and there is a message that people want to receive. But is it just like pushing whatever you're interested in at the time or the campaigns that you think are important? Probably not, right?
That's what I call a content sweet spot. You need to figure out what the content sweet spot is.
Yeah.
What your business is trying to achieve and then what the person that you're talking to is actually thinking. And it's about finding that piece in the middle where the two meet.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
To really bring your messages to life in a way that will resonate and land.
Yeah.
Without it just feeling like you're shoving messages down my throat.
Yeah, it needs to be positioned from the audience's point of view. Like, what is actually helpful for me? Like, what would I find utility in? And once you discover what that is, then you can talk to your audience a lot more, I think. Yeah.
What kind of budget do businesses need to commit to do performance marketing well? And I think if I'm trying to kind of make this relevant to the range of listeners, we'll have people who are working with big organizations and they'll have agencies who will help set those budgets. But then it's the SMEs and the smaller businesses, they're trying to figure out what does good look like.
You mean in terms of budget?
Yeah.
Budgets can be really funny. It's a funny word, right? Because often it's sort of thought about in a short term, with a short term sort of intention behind it. How much budget are we spending this month? How much are we spending next month? And really we need to flip the script on that and make it more about long-term thinking, because budget should really be the output rather than the input, and what do I mean by that? Essentially, you need to understand your business and your unit economics, and you need to really run those calculations first before you can land on, what you should be spending. So I'd flip the question back to you, like, what is a customer worth, for example?
Yeah.
Like, don't know. What is a customer worth?
What's the cost of running your business?
Yeah.
And then what is that number that is comfortable with your spending?
Okay.
How, is it like I spend $1, how much do I need to get back?
How about this? Let's play a little game or have a bit of fun. Okay, so let's say you run an online shoe store, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Zania shoes.
Yeah.
You import beautiful shoes from around the world and you sell them for about $500 per pair, okay? So like maybe Michael Kors or DKNY or something along those lines. And but the problem is you've got some overheads, okay? So you've got fulfillment that you need to take care of. You need to buy the shoes. You might have hosting for your website. The list goes on. And let's say on average per pair of shoes sold, that costs you about $100, okay? So you're left with $400, after that. And this is like before ads. And so then you start thinking about, okay, I've been dabbling in Google Ads. I've been dabbling in Meta. But Zania, actually, you've done something really smart, okay? You've got a great retention program. And nurture campaign for your audience. And what you find is that over time, let's say you've been in market for like 3 years, that people end up coming back and they buy about 5 pairs of shoes off you over that period of time. Okay. So that's a really massive insight, because then you can calculate your LTV, or your customer lifetime value, right? And so that's 400 times 5, so that's $2,000. So that's really massive, because then you can go, okay, so what should my LTV CAC be? So it's LTV CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. And there's benchmarks for this that you can look up online. And ultimately, you should be aiming for like minimum 2 to 1. So that's like $1,000 spent on ads, all the way up to like excellent is like 5 to 1. So $400 per new customer that you sell a pair of shoes to, right?
Right.
And then that's where like the budget becomes the output, because you can be like, okay, I want to make $1 million a year, or I want to get 60 new customers through the door per month, and you can sort of run the numbers from there. But the idea is that the budget that you're spending, you need to stay within that zone of like 2 to 1 to 5 to 1.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. And that's how budget becomes the output.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about it over a longer term period, because it becomes like a growth mechanism rather than a cost center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clever. And so you've described managing performance like flying a plane. I don't know how to fly a plane.
Yeah.
And if you're only watching the dial, you're in trouble. Can you talk us through what does this mean? And what are you saying?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my team get like sick of me talking about it. But it's sort of like an easy way to think about, I think, running performance marketing, especially paid. But let's say you're wanting to get from A to B, like you're going to go down to Wellington, for example. Okay, there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can drive, right? It's going to be cheaper than flying, and you learn a lot along the way around the journey and like how to get there and things like that. And you're sort of like it's like organic, right? Organic social, organic search. Like it takes a bit longer, but once you learn how to get there, it feels a lot quicker the next time you do it. Or you can fly, right? And that's a bit more expensive, but you're going to get there a lot quicker, okay? And so the main thing is that like when you're flying, so we're going to double click on paid media now, planes, they generally tend to stay at a certain altitude. So like if you're flying internationally, it's like between 20,000, 40,000 feet. Why is that? Okay, it's because like the air's thinner up there and ensures a smoother ride once you get up to that altitude. Also there's less turbulence and it's more fuel efficient to get to your destination. So that's a super important thing to think about when it comes to your spend and your budget. Like we were just talking about like LTV CAC, optimal performance zone, which is that 2 to 1 to 5 to 1. Like you want to get there and you want to stay there as long as you possibly can, because that's where you're getting the best return on investment, right? Yeah. Okay. But to get up there, like you need to go through some clouds and some bad weather and some turbulence. So you sort of need to use a little bit of extra fuel or like spend to get up to that level.
For the learnings.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you're less efficient as you're getting up there, but once you get there, you're super efficient. And so you're cruising at that altitude, and then all of a sudden you get like a message from air traffic control, like, Zania, you're coming up to the end of the month, or it's your finance team essentially as air traffic control.
Yeah.
And they're like, you need to slow down.
Pull back.
Yeah, you need to slow down because you're going to overshoot the runway. What are you doing? And that's when you realize, we've got a monthly budget cap. And so like our goal no longer becomes being as profitable or efficient as we possibly can be. It becomes hitting this arbitrary number at the end of the month. And so you go, okay, I'm going to spend the final week of my month turning down my bids so that I'm, so I can land on this number. And so you're intentionally sort of like limiting your growth opportunity and becoming super inefficient just so that you can satisfy the finance team, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is a massive problem. Like if you're running monthly budgets, and most businesses in New Zealand do,
Yeah.
you're spending 1 week getting up to that altitude, 2 weeks there, which is great, and then another week coming down. That's 50% of your month. You're inefficient and limiting your growth. That's 50% of your year, right? So that's really crazy. And I think if a lot of like C-level executives heard this, they'd actually be quite shocked that that's the case.
That's
so
crazy.
yeah, and so
Because
there's like
you kind of want to just be efficient all year round and not be limited by the financial systems that we're kind of constraining ourselves with.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so like it's super important for an organization to think about this, and even like SMBs, like the way that they're spending their budget, as opposed to like thinking about things from like a daily or a monthly. Like start thinking about quarterly budgets. Start thinking about like if we can just stay within this efficiency threshold, then it doesn't matter because this is actually a flywheel for growth.
Yeah.
Rather than just a cost center. And I think that's the problem. Everyone thinks about it as cost center.
So I'm assuming you got around that within Xero. How did you must have become best mates with the CFO, and how did you make that happen? Because that is obviously, I suppose it's not something that marketers themselves can control.
That's right.
There's a whole lot of other people involved in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Like this isn't like a marketing problem. It's an organizational problem. So the first thing is that you need to have a team that's like really, an organization that's really keen to sort of like look at new innovative ways of approaching things.
They really like making money.
Yeah, or like they really understand,
Yeah.
what is going on and like how performance marketing can have such a fundamental impact to the bottom line, right? And so that's the first thing. Like you need to have a CFO who gets it. Like that's number one. Two, you need to set up like a cross-functional working group between finance, marketing, and data, so that you're all communicating on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis as to how spend is going. And sure, there's like monthly run rates still, but you can organize for ways for things to move around in an agile basis so that you aren't capped,
Are you in-house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I imagine that's kind of an easier way as well, because I'm thinking when you do work with agencies, it is working to month, so that makes it more challenging. But there must be ways around that too.
Yeah, but is that monthly thing with agencies, is that just an accountability measure?
I think it's because they
the
whole system. Yeah, I think it is. It's an accounting.
It's just to make sure that they're delivering on sort of what was agreed upon, but it's not necessarily like there are other metrics that you can look at to understand whether or not your agency is delivering, as opposed to did you spend the budget? That's like a really lazy way, I think, of keeping your holding your agency to account, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that I've looked into a couple of accounts recently, and I found it really interesting that some agencies were not actively managing. It's a bit of like set and forget kind of. And like one of the examples was they were bidding only on brand and telling the client how they were doing such an amazing job, and then didn't the activity for whatever reason paused for a month, and of course sales didn't change at all.
Okay.
And that's because all they were doing was bidding brand.
Okay.
And so, like, I feel like there's some really fundamental kind of learnings, and a lot of clients don't know how to understand. Agencies will tell them, we're doing a great job, we're delivering impressions, we're delivering clicks. But I'm about, actually, I believe to be a good marketer, you need to deliver results. If you're not delivering results, which are sales, then you're not doing the job properly. Because I have an inherent belief that if you could be doing brand and performance together, and all of these things should be working, and that the website should be working optimally, and that you're doing good, content to help drive SEO, and that you're setting up best practice email marketing campaigns, and so that all of the jigsaw puzzle together is super powerful.
Yeah.
But
I'd change that. I'd say you're doing your job if you're driving incremental sales.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So brand's a really interesting one, like brand search.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the common pitfalls, I guess, of like new players in the industry or people who aren't necessarily educated, bidding on brands, there is a small amount of incrementality, but you need to find out what that is.
Yeah.
So you need to run conversion lift studies. You need to, to understand like how incremental is my brand. And you might find that there's 5%, 10%, it's something, but you just don't know what it is. So until you do that research, it's very hard to say like how much cannibalization is happening between paid. It's definitely not. It's not 100%. Like how many of these users would have come through and bought anyway? In your case, it was like most of them, right?
Yeah.
It always is like most of them. But that's like one of the common pitfalls. Another one is, spending lots of budget on programmatic without having like ad fraud detection and safeguards in place. You can throw a lot of money at programmatic, but it ends up just being burnt by bots or, being viewed by someone in a basement in some Eastern European country somewhere or something like that. You know what I mean? And then I think the final one would most probably be attribution.
Yeah.
If you don't have attribution understanding as to like where your sales are truly coming from, like which channels are actually driving those, you can spend a lot of budget on areas like brand that aren't actually driving incremental sales. Yeah. Yeah. Important. Like that relationship with the agency is absolutely key.
And so you just completed the honours program. And you went to HQ in San Francisco.
Yeah, yep.
What was it like? What did you get out of it? And did it give you a sort of a feel for where the industry is going?
Yeah. So last year our team won the best in-house award at Google Honours, which was super cool. Yeah, and as a result of that, you won a trip over to San Francisco.
Yeah, mic drop there.
Yeah. I mean. It was like a bit of a milestone. Like it's one of those things going over to San Fran as a digital marketer, as a performance marketer. It's one of those things that you always want to do, like just to go and see it and what it's all about. And it's super funny. It's like crazy because like you leave the airport and as soon as you're on the highway, 90% of the billboards are like tech startups pitching to other tech startups. Okay. And like I loved a couple of them. There was one that said, stop hiring humans, hire Ava, the AI BDR.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, seriously. Like just straight out, like just straight in your face, Another one was
stop hiring humans.
Stop hiring humans, yeah. Another one was compliance that doesn't SOC 2 much. And SOC 2, or SOC 2 is like a security compliance framework. And so they're just like communicating in acronyms to other engineers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who cares about the rest of the public? It's not,
and we're like, what?
Yeah, it's not like nappies and dog food like it is over here. It's like very, very focused. And there's a limited amount of real estate. And there's like outdoor everywhere, okay? Like on poles and on, so, and it's all tech. So that was really fascinating. The second part, I then jumped in an Uber. And the guy who was driving the Uber stank of weed, and he pitched me his startup when he found out that I was in performance marketing, which was an online diamond marketplace.
Oh wow!
And I was like, okay, that's great, man. Hopefully we'll just arrive in the destination soon. And then the other thing is like on every corner in San Francisco is a Waymo. So I don't know if you're familiar with these robo taxi sort of autonomous vehicles. Yeah, they got like 20 cameras and spinning sensors, and they're quite a sight to see. And I jumped on one of those, and it was really cool. Like you open the app, and it actually you press a button to start the ride, and then the steering wheel's turning, and there's no one else in the car, and it's pretty surreal. But I've got to be honest with you, it is the future, and like it was actually a really safe and smooth ride. Like much better than the ride with the stone sort of startup guy.
Yeah. And I think actually as a woman, if you were, traveling on your own, it would feel much safer and just so much better. But you can see that's where we're going. It's like that movie. What was the movie? Total Recall or something. I think it was. and like a mixture of like Total Recall and the Jetsons. Like we're just going to have like robot nannies and like toilets that clean themselves. Thank God. And like just our whole world is going to change. Which is what's the feeling that you got about this impending change that's coming?
I mean, the general feeling was that there's a lot of progress. I mean, San Francisco itself is like a very interesting place because obviously there's a huge amount of homelessness, right? And so you see,
and apparently quite a lot of drug abuse and
yeah, definitely. Like you see people who are really high on fentanyl who have essentially passed out, standing up with a duvet around them. And
the zombies that are kind of
yeah, that's right. And then a Waymo goes past, and you're like, yeah, this is fascinating, sort of dystopian sort of place. You know, so the tech is like going so fast, but then there's a lot of people being left behind at the same time, and so that sort of acceleration is really interesting and sort of scary in some ways. But like, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a huge amount of benefit in. Like, yeah, these new innovations for sure, like just finding the right places and where it actually works is super important. And so, everything over there is AI at the moment. But like, I think the highlight of the trip was definitely going to Mountain View. And, it's sort of like one part like workplace for some of the smartest minds in tech who are like solving problems for billions of people. And then it's like a theme park for people like me and the others who from Australia who got to go over on this trip. And, just to give you an idea of the scale of the place, it's like, 30 plus cafes, restaurants, like a bowling alley, gyms everywhere. There's on-site doctors and dentists. If you're an employee, you can get an oil change. This is the interesting thing. A lot of the young engineers who join out of university, they actually just buy an RV and park it in the car park and just live there, so that they can save their money and get ahead because they don't really need to spend any money on anything, So it was really fascinating. There's like a life-size dinosaur just out in the Googleplex, and I think that serves as a reminder to not become a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Fascinating place and just absolutely just massive, yeah.
And so we're all kind of watching what's happening with ChatGPT and Perplexity and Google. Yeah. What's your predictions on how these giants are going to reshape search and discovery and performance, and what is that going to look like? And do you think it's coming faster than we think, or like, is it going to be that? I was looking at some numbers yesterday that Neil Patel had shared to kind of help set the scene of searches on Google versus searches on ChatGPT and what that looked like.
Yeah. What was he saying?
He was saying...
Was it like volume of searches or...
Yeah, I can show you.
Okay.
I'll have to show you. It was basically sort of Google's still really strong and powerful, and we don't need to worry quite yet.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it's coming.
Yeah.
And like what really fascinated me was when I found out that Shopify is integrating natively inside ChatGPT. So then people will be able to just ask their GPT to find the best stuff. And then eventually it'll be like, can you go and buy it? So actually I won't have to do anything. It'll just happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways that we could approach this conversation. Like, it's so fascinating.
It is.
I mean, it's like Pacquiao Mayweather, or like, Drake Kendrick, or like David versus Goliath, or, like when you have two massive, like a huge innovation like ChatGPT and behemoth like Google sort of coming together and clashing, like it's just hard to take your eyes off what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, I know that we're all sharing around, information on a daily basis, right? Because there's just so much stuff happening.
Shout out to Adnan, who's on it.
Yeah. But I mean, like ChatGPT was a game changer in late 2022, like 2022, like within its first, I think it was 2 months of being in market, it turned, it had 100 million users sign up, right? It's the fastest growing app ever. But like, let's start in, like, I'll just wind back the clock because, everything didn't start in 2022, in 2014, Google purchased a company called DeepMind. Okay. And that was like a really new sort of machine learning and AI focused startup. And then in 2017, Google released a paper called Attention is All You Need. And that was sort of the start of this whole movement around transformer architecture. Okay. Now, a lot of people probably don't know this, but Google actually introduced the platform or the architecture or the technology that all of their competitors are using now. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, right? That was created by Google, transformer technology. Yeah, which is really fascinating. And like in 2017, Google rolled out a model called BERT, which could understand the context of a search. So it went from being like, what is a bank? And it would be able to understand whether you mean a financial institution or the side of like a river. Okay. And while like people like me who are in the industry thought that was really revolutionary, no one else cared. Like search continued to work. And they did a couple of other things with AI technology, like they were grouping Google Photos together with, someone's face, and that was kind of cool, and it was a little bit controversial. But back then, like everyone thought of AI as like a little bit creepy. Like, what are you trying to do? Like imitate the neural networks of a human's brain. And then ChatGPT dropped in 2022 and the landscape completely changed, right? Fastest growing app ever. And now Google has been playing catch up for quite a long time.
Here it is. How popular are the top AI platforms compared to Google? 13.7 billion daily searches on Google.
Yeah.
ChatGPT 1 billion daily searches.
Yeah.
So like...
Yeah. So like back of the envelope maths, you can sort of say at the current run rate of like growth of ChatGPT, if it stays in like a linear trajectory, it's going to be about like 6 years or so until it catches up to the same sort of level as Google.
Yeah.
But if it continues on like an exponential growth path, it could be as soon as like 2 years as to when it catches up to Google in terms of the usage, right?
Wow.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's been that new partnership where he's purchased, and I can't remember the name.
OpenAI has purchased?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And it's the designer who helped design
that's
the
right.
iPhone.
That's right.
And so you can see they're kind of going in the direction of
hardware.
Yeah, and how we seamlessly integrate this into our lives.
Yeah. And they dropped that, I think it was called I.O., and it was like right when Google were doing their Google I.O., which was the big, annual sort of product release event, which happened a couple of weeks ago, and they had Google Marketing Live, which was the same week, and Google was just like AI everything. We're just going to drop like AI mode and AI Max in Google Ads, and you're going to be able to run ads and AI overviews. So it's just AI.
Yeah.
It just gets a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
But like Google's sort of now getting to that place where they can actually monetize AI. And that's not actually a huge focus of theirs, to be perfectly honest with you. Like Google's always looked at, focusing on the user as the main thing. And like if we follow the user, everything else will come. That's been like a core tenet of their business, and it's worked for them.
Yeah.
But like, let's just talk about the scale of Google, okay, just for a moment. Like in Q1 this year, globally, they made $82 billion of revenue, okay, and they keep a third of that in net profit. So that's just like a huge war chest. They've got, I think it's 10 different apps with over 2 billion users. They have over 50 apps with like 100 million users. Like this distribution is massive. So that's a core opportunity for them. When you think about Google Maps, you think about, Gmail, YouTube, Google Search, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And so they've got like a bigger problem to solve here where it's like, how do we overlay AI across everything and make it useful? And they had like a massive issue with like just pop-ups, Gemini pop-ups, appearing all the time. I was like, this isn't actually useful, guys. Like, can you just integrate it in a, elegant way so that I can find that it solves problems for me in my day-to-day life? And that's something that ChatGPT is definitely doing for like all of us, right? Like you can ask it most anything, it will get it correct, although it is still probabilistic, and so you do need to sense check the answers from time to time.
It hallucinates still quite a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I think Gemini as well, and
it makes up
different use cases for different platforms.
It makes up quotes. You can be doing research on a person, and we're like, and what good example, I was looking up stuff that Neil Patel does, and it was saying about SEO, and it's Neil Patel said blah blah blah, and I was like, right. Did he say that? So then you go and look, and it's like, oh no. And then I said, no, but I don't think he did say that. And it was like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't just make up a quote to make something sound good.
Yeah.
And so you really need to be so careful because you have to really triple check everything that it creates. Yeah, but like, you said there was a quieter but important shift happening in LLM optimization.
Yeah.
And that honestly just went over my head. I was like, what does that mean? And can you tell us what does that mean for us, for marketers?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I sort of briefly referred to it earlier. So it's a really nascent space, but it's like a new discipline called AEO, or GEO, so answer engine optimization or generative engine optimization.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like SEO, right? Although instead of like looking at pages, it's looking at language and mentions and things of that nature.
So how do you get your business showing up inside
Exactly.
AI?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And like an easy way to sort of describe the difference between SEO and GEO is like, for example, what are you interested in? Like any topic?
Marketing.
Okay, marketing.
Like,
Sure.
I'm
Okay,
just living dream.
Yeah.
How to make you money? How to help?
Okay, let's say you're interested in scuba diving. Okay, like you go to Google, and Google's kind of like a library.
Yeah.
Okay, Google search, and you'll say, I'm interested in scuba diving. Like, I want to learn more about this. And say, okay, it's kind of like a library. It will point you to all of the books, and it'll say, look, read these books, learn about them, and then you'll get a better understanding as to how to go scuba diving, what tools you need, like what you need to do in order to train. Okay, so you do the work, whereas AI and GEO is more like you can talk to a scuba diving professional, and they'll say to you, I've read all of these books, and this is what I've gleaned from that, and what's helpful for you, right? And if you're a scuba diving product or like brand, you want to be one of the books that they're referencing, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a really new space.
Yeah.
But the good news is that like it's very similar to SEO. So if you're already doing a lot of SEO work, there's probably going to be some benefit to what you're already doing because a lot of the different things that AI is looking at are quite similar to Google.
But it looks at more things.
It does,
it looks at
for sure.
Social, it looks at reviews, looks at...
Yeah, and it doesn't rely on links.
No.
Like Google's often looked at links as like a core indicator as to whether or not, you're trustworthy and you have authority. Whereas, AI will look at like just mentions. So you'll hear about citations a lot in this space. So as opposed to, did someone link back to you? Have they just mentioned you? And it's not like putting up a lot of walls like Google does around like user-generated content. Like it will lean into because it can understand, was that a good review? Does that seem like a human actually wrote it? Like,
is it going viral?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like all of that, like a big thing in SEO is something called EEAT. So expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, right? So that's like trust and credibility. Do you know what you're talking about? Have others said that you do? And I mean, the main thing is like, if you make a good product, you've got a really strong brand and people are talking about it in a positive light, then you're most probably like halfway there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do you think that recipe for success for businesses is that the ingredients for success that you kind of see all working together in this new world, you kind of need what are the pieces of the puzzle or the ingredients? What are they that everyone needs to kind of set themselves up to win?
I think if we're just talking about AEO or GEO,
AI, like AI,
let's just start there. Like, I think the first thing is to measure everything, right? Like with GEO, like there are platforms which are similar to like social listening tools.
Yeah.
That you can use to understand how visible your brand is in AI. So like Profound is a good one. And they're a startup out of New York, like tryprofound.com. That's like one of the sort of like early, like I think winners in this space. And they'll tell you all sorts of things, and it's really cool because you can have a look at what sort of prompts are people using, what are they saying, and that have eventuated in our brand showing up. You can look at it by region, you can look at it by platform. So Perplexity versus ChatGPT versus Gemini. You can have a look at like overall sentiment, like positive or negative, and so on. So it's like a bit of a rabbit hole. It's really fascinating for someone like me who just loves this stuff. So that's a massive deep dive, for sure.
Do you think, because I think SEO, in my view, the way I've worked with brands and the journey I've gone on, the reality is good SEO isn't about trying to hack the matrix. It's about creating an amazing product that's genuinely helping people and not keyword stuffing your website, but just answering the questions that humans have. Yeah. And if you're genuinely offering value and quality and it's fresh and it's updating regularly, that's how you win.
Yeah, make it easy to read.
Yeah.
Make it easy to find, make your website structured in a way that's like user-friendly
You
and
don't have
makes
to hunt.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, make the page, structured in a certain way, so it's really obvious what you're talking about.
And have the navigation that includes the key things that you're trying to sell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like all of those things. And like, again, it comes back to data-driven decision-making, like looking at what is going on and interpreting, like, how is the user finding things? Qualitative, like user experience testing, for example, is extremely important on your website and on your pages. And
stop designing for desktop.
Stop designing for tests. Yeah. Design for everything.
Mobile first and design for everything.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that if you can make sure that like your landing page is constantly being updated, like you're updating your content a lot, that's really important for SEO and for AI, which has a much higher recency bias than, say, like Google search does.
So dig into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Say you are a e-commerce business.
Yeah.
On the homepage, you're saying it's good to keep things fresh, update it regularly, because it gives the search engines a reason to come and crawl your site again. If it's very stagnant, it doesn't change.
Yeah. I mean, like mark up your website with new like schema that's required for AI as well. So it's easier to crawl and index. Like, as we know, because the information's floating around, AI crawls a lot more and won't generate the same number of users that, say, Google search does. But if you show up in the results, it's gold. Okay. Because that will lead to more actions. Like Google search has had more searches in the past year than it's ever had. And part of that is probably spurred on by the fact that people are researching and then they want to find out and then they actually use Google search, So even though you might not get as many users as you used to, like you need to be part of that conversation. Yeah.
But you're not seeing a massive drop off through, are you?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. Like, I think everyone's seeing an organic search that there's a drop.
Oh, no, but in the paid
search is great. Like it's cranking for sure. Yeah.
So you've worked across businesses of all sizes, from startups to global enterprises. What lessons have been universally true that you take forward and you kind of build on that knowledge and realize that it works for you?
Yeah.
And that sort of it's universal no matter what size.
Yeah. I think the first one is communication is key. Like the people that you're dealing with in a small to medium-sized business, they're trying to do everything all at once. Okay. And while we, like you and me and a lot of people listening to this podcast will find like the analytics and like all of these metrics really interesting, they just need the phone to ring.
#geek.
Yeah.
Proud geek.
That's us.
Yeah.
That's us.
Yeah.
But if you're like running a plumbing business,
Yeah.
you've got all these people you need to take care of. You've got vans that need to get serviced. You've got like, jobs that need to be done. You need to make sure that the pipeline, like, more sales coming in. You've got accounting to deal with. You've got the kids are screaming at you. You just want the phone to ring and you just want the lead to be fired in the website.
Yeah.
Communication is critical. Even with a C-level executive at a global enterprise business, they're super time poor. Okay. Like, don't waste their time with lots and lots of, sort of articulation around things and over talking it. You need to get straight to the point. You need to be prepared with what you're saying. So that has definitely rung true in every single level of marketing that you get into.
So it's like,
and it's a respect
people's time.
Respect other people's time for sure. I think also like people really make the difference. Okay. So it doesn't matter, like how good your strategy is, or like how well you've thought through things. If you've got a bloated, team who are not motivated and, they're not like hungry for success, then, nothing's going to happen. I've seen like really small, agile, hungry teams like outperform really large teams, 7 days out of the week, So I think making sure that there's the fire inside everyone who you're working with. And if you're a leader that you can drive that, you need to find a way to be high energy, really inspired and focused and wanting to innovate all the time, right? So that's super key. And then the other one is like, you need to stay in motion. Momentum is everything.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're slowing down, you're stagnant, you've got a cross-functional project and like the guy in the other team isn't doing what needs to be done. Or if you're a small to medium size business owner and you're not seeing results, then things are going to slow down. You need to make sure that pace is always there.
Yeah.
Whether it's even just, thinking and working through innovative ideas, or whether it's the actual hands-on execution, you need to make sure that there's some.
Question about creative. How critical is it to have a range of creatives to power that success in your campaigns? Is it about honing in on what's working and doing more of what works, or do you I'm curious to know how many variations you're running at any one time.
Yeah, I mean, how long's a piece of string? We have so many.
Yeah.
We have so many different variations across video, display, search, you name it, right? And we're trying to put as many pieces of creative live, on a regular basis as we can, really. That makes sense. The same time, when there is something that works, you don't necessarily need to kill it simply because you think there's some sort of creative, issue, or there's some slowing of performance. You need to have a look at your numbers. But we're constantly trying to get new creative in market, without a doubt. Heavily leaning on AI these days as well to help in that side of things.
Oh, really?
And it's really fascinating.
You
might think it would be a very simple prompt, prompts that are 3 pages long will generate amazing creative. But you need to be super, super specific around what you're saying, and think about that prompt from lots of different angles. Mm-hmm. Okay. And
so you've created a prompt that lets you create great creative that you can put live.
I can't take full credit for it, but this is a work in progress, right? For sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
We need to have coffee.
It's exciting. Yeah, it's an exciting time for sure. Yeah.
And so I often see, and I find it strange that it's kind of still raging on, but there's this kind of conversation around brand and performance marketing and what's more important. And I think it's great that you kind of, I think, are on the same page as me, that it's full funnel marketing that people should be looking at, and it's both, and that they all work together and make it more powerful. Can you talk a bit about your views around that?
Yeah, sure. Brands, brand fuels the ecosystem, right? It fuels the funnel. If you don't have brand running, then, your demand is going to dry up. There's only so much conquesting we can do, and trying to intercept people midway through the funnel. And so, brand is absolutely critical. It's hard to measure too, right? In the way that we run performance marketing. And I think that there can be this expectation that it needs to sort of line up and pay its dues. But there are ways that you can measure brand. One is search lift, for example. So when you've got activity in market, how many more branded queries popping up, incremental. There's triple M, so that you can get an understanding as to the overall value.
Media mix modeling, just in case you don't know what that is.
Probably discussed on a few previous episodes. But brand is absolutely critical. We've tested turning brand off, for example, and you just feel it. You can. It's a noticeable difference in terms of the overall demand, and so there is just a symbiotic relationship, And I think that, it's depending on your business and your vertical, the proportion of performance versus brand is going to change. But there's no silver bullet for that either. No. It just depends, and you need to do a lot of research into it to truly understand, what sort of levels of spend you should have in each sort of layer. Yeah.
I think I've heard some say it's 60-40, 60 to performance, 40 to brand.
Yeah,
others say it's the other way around, 60 to brand, 40 to performance.
There you go.
Yeah, so it depends, or that could be in different ratios depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
What's your have you found that there tends to be a pattern that you've seen, what that ratio is over the different companies that you've worked with?
No,
you're on the 40-60 or the 60-40?
No, it varies wildly.
Oh, really?
Some businesses that should be running brand don't believe in it, and others don't believe in performance marketing. That's honestly,
Who's that?
Well,
no, don't give me names.
Yeah. So, So that's really fascinating. I think it's just like a level of knowledge and education that comes along with like this whole ecosystem, right? Like this is a big space.
And it's not an easy ecosystem. I think that's the other thing is that I find there are many people who say they can do digital marketing. I mean, I've been doing it for over 15 years and every day I still learn stuff.
That's
and but I've worked hard to drive results for the people that I've worked with, and you learn lessons over time. And those lessons, though, like you say, because it's changing all the time, sometimes those lessons won't work. They're out of date, and so you've got to adapt. And I think it's that having to constantly test and learn that is what I love about it, because it's then it's the having to relearn what you thought you knew is something I enjoy. I kind of believe if you stop learning, you die.
Yes.
And so it's like that a certain type of person.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
That really enjoys it and thrives off it. And it's that person who is weird, who, like, people ask me what my hobby is. It's literally marketing and reading AI and everything of the future. Like, everything that I do is my hobby.
Yeah.
Someone told me once that that's not normal and that's not healthy, but that's just who I am.
Yeah, that level of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something that has really served me well throughout my career.
Being curious?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's something that I definitely look for in people when we're recruiting and we're running interviews, because it's quite rare, to be perfectly honest with you, someone who's willing to, think outside the box, who has that baseline knowledge, but is willing to sort of take a risk and, think in an unorthodox way to, find a solution to the problem, right? It's so valuable because it is so rare. But it makes for like interesting conversations. Like, these people are fascinating. Like, you sit down and you have a drink with them and they've always got something weird and unusual to share. And it makes for a great chat, So that's one thing that's definitely kept me in this area is the people.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think even more so, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but like marketing association, like we're both part of the marketing association, Digital SIG, and like being amongst like-minded people, it's such a cool thing because you can you're all kind of geeking out together. And
it's also like the opposing views at times, right? And that constructive debate around what is going to happen, what is the benefit, why should we care about this? And it's so great when you see someone who's contrarian and they come through with an opposing view to what you always believe, was actually fact. Yeah. Not necessarily, So that's what I love about it for sure. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. So Xero's got a really diverse customer base.
Yeah.
And your performance strategy must be highly nuanced because there's so many different types of customers, industries.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is the key to success targeting very niche audiences, or is it that AI is kind of changing the game and you go wider and it finds the right people for you? Or and you go broad, what is the key to success for you guys? Don't give away where trades.
Yeah, sure. We might have, a tradie down in Pahiatua, and then, like in terms of our audience, there might be a big accounting firm in Sydney, and then, there might be a creative entrepreneur over in Atlanta, and then, another business in Johannesburg and, wherever. And so it is super varied in terms of that customer base and user profile. And we used to, operate our business in that way, where it was like, you want to be as niche as possible because we want to talk to everyone in that way, or we want to be highly sophisticated with our targeting and like very, very detailed.
But now the platform's and more broad because AI wants to have like a broader audience to learn on.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got to think about this in terms of like the levels of complexity. Like we're talking about, different currencies, that slows things down. Like that makes it harder to get to insights because you're constantly doing currency conversion. Okay. So let's think about it in terms of like where we're at today. Okay. Platforms are now looking at the data that you're passing back and they're making their own decisions around who they think is the best person to see your creative and see your activity. but it's only based on the quality of the detail that you're passing back.
Yeah.
Okay. So
this is like the pixel data and things like that.
Yeah, I look at it like when someone signs up, I want to let the platforms know as quickly as possible, the location, the device, the behaviors, the actions, and so on, so that it can make a more informed decision around who it should be targeting.
Yeah.
It's no longer about me going and having like this super, super complex, campaign structure that's actually just slowing me down in terms of getting to market because I have to tweak all of these dials and there's thousands of them. Let's make it simplified. Let's consolidate all of the conversions. Let's package them up with a bow on it and send it back to Google and Meta and say, here's the latest information that you need to know so that you can make better decisions.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Which to people who are not as au fait with all of this, that is the key to that is implementing the pixels from Meta and from Google in your website.
Yeah. It's more like getting conversions API, which is server to server, so that you don't need to worry about cookie deprecation.
Yeah.
Which has just been this looming grey cloud over us for like 10 years now or something. But making sure that you are communicating back to the platform exactly what's going on so that it can make better decisions. And you're bidding in a way that focuses on value or focuses on volume, depending on what you want, right? As opposed to just paying for a user to come through to the website. Yeah.
Because the AI, when I was talking to Meta, they were like, the AI is smart. If you just tell it you want landing page views, you're going to get landing page views, but those people are not likely to buy.
That's right.
So be careful what you're choosing when you're choosing your objectives because it'll give you what you ask for.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at now. I think that, like we're thinking about applied science, predictive modeling, all those sorts of things, as opposed to like how can we create a new ad group that is more tailored to, tradies or, hair salons in, New York or something like that.
And I think, do you believe that the targeting of today is the creative? So the creative is now more important because it's what you're saying in the creative that will help identify the person to resonate with it.
Yeah, creative is super, super important, without a doubt. I think it's sort of like equal parts creative and then also what I was saying around like unit economics. So making sure that you understand, what you should be bidding and paying. So from an ROI perspective, I think those are two of the key levers for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for smaller brands with limited resources, what are some kind of smart, scrappy strategies that they could use to get results?
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that are always going to be true. So like nail your landing page and your offer.
And what does that mean?
Yeah, that means like look at your landing page and tweak it to make sure that it's, getting good conversion rates and make sure that the offer that you're putting forward is like resonating with your audience.
And what's a good landing page look like in your eyes? There'll be a recipe that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, just good UX. So like attractive, easy to follow, answering all of those key points of friction.
Reasons. Do you do the 3 reasons to believe, a video if they want to watch one? Trust signals?
No, not necessarily. Not all. I mean, trust and credibility for sure. Like reviews, ratings, any accreditations or like certificates or achievements, like that's key. But writing things in a colloquial way, the best way to do this, and this is another thing, is like listen to your customer, talk to your customers.
Yeah.
Because the way that they say things is going to be the perfect colloquial copy for you to put on your page.
Yeah.
And that's going to jump out at people.
Yeah.
Not an over sort of, overthought, sort of jumbled up sentence stuff with keywords. Like just use the verbatim feedback that they've provided you.
I found a really good way of getting ideas for copy is going into the Google review section. Yeah. And reading the reviews.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, perfect.
So much interesting insights. Yeah. And then you can scrape all of the reviews and then if you want to use AI to then help glean what the kind of repetitive key themes are that are coming through to help you sometimes recognize what your selling points might be. Because sometimes you're so close to it, you don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Like it's often the best friend of the founder who knows what the startup, the audience really wants, right?
Yeah.
Another thought would be go deep on your best channel. So don't spread yourself too thin.
Yeah.
So there's some really great, solo entrepreneurs out there who will just focus on one channel a year. So they're going to go super deep on YouTube in 2024.
Yeah.
Then this year they're going super deep on TikTok until they master it.
Yeah.
And then they move on. Like, don't just deploy budget across everything, hoping that something sticks. Like, you don't just want to be a jack of all trades. You want to be a master of each one before you move on to the next one if you're a small to medium-sized business.
Are you using TikTok?
Yeah, we run TikTok.
As a performance channel?
Yep, for sure.
And is it doing well for you? Because they put out some really interesting case studies with of how it can drive through the funnel and it is a hard-working channel if you want it to be.
Yeah.
Are you finding that all of them are important for a business as big as Xero?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
or has it got a different role? Is it more brand and kind of?
Yeah, we're not using it as like a huge conversion driver at the moment. But I think it's it's an evolving sort of beast. I think there's a lot more for us to get out of it, and we're still, we're probably like a couple of years into using TikTok, right? We weren't like first movers at all.
Have you got it on your phone?
TikTok?
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
Are you addicted?
No, I don't. I try not to jump on it too much.
Okay.
Like it's really funny. I probably try to monitor my social a lot, and I think the part of that is because I've got a couple of daughters now, and I want to make sure that I'm not signaling to them that this is like a good idea to constantly be on your phone. So there's part of that, but I need to be on there for research purposes for sure. Yeah,
that's how I learn what my son is doing. Because he posts TikToks. And I see them. Yeah. So as this world is changing and things moving a million miles an hour, how do you stay up to date? What are your resources that you go to kind of keep on top of what's going on?
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions that we should all tune into?
Okay. Yeah, it's not like 5 years ago or like 10 years ago where you would just like go to one blog.
No.
Had like everything, right? Now it's like channels and, audio and like text and video and like everything all at once.
And email chat.
Yeah.
Even.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm a massive podcast listener. So like I'm listening to All In podcast, which is great because it gives me, the latest on what's going on in big tech and like, the technology space, which is fascinating. I really love Scott Galloway. He's great. Prof G. Maybe don't always agree with everything that he says, but I find him to be super engaging and fascinating, like lots of nuggets of knowledge there. LinkedIn, I follow, a handful of people who are like actually on the tools and doing the stuff day to day. There's a lot of noise out there, so I try to, just curate, a very small amount of like really good.
Do you follow me?
Well, I mean, I talk to you all the time, I feel like. I listen to the Marketing Masters podcast. How's that,
You are.
But yeah, I really love listening to VCs as well, like venture capitalists, because their job is to place bets on what's going to happen in the future. And, they get it wrong, but they get a lot of things right too. So Andreessen Horowitz, Y Combinator, even Icehouse in New Zealand, checking out what they're doing and where they're making investments is also super fascinating. Yeah.
And so to close us out, what's the kind of amazing piece of advice you want to have the audience walk away with so that they have kind of wrapped up all of these incredible things that you've given us today?
Okay. Well, I'd say just always be learning. Like, don't slow down your learning. There's so many really easy ways to educate yourself on what's going on these days. So just take advantage and dive in. And curiosity didn't kill the cat. I think it made him more interesting and sort of opened up a lot of doors for him. So that would be my advice. Just keep on keeping on and upskill as much as you can. And
are you quite active on LinkedIn if people want to follow and hear more from you?
Yeah. I'm posting, always sort of doing different things. So, jump on LinkedIn, check us out. I'll see you on there.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Zania.